Okay, properties of rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. You've learned about these in elementary school, but today we're going to talk about all the individual properties. Okay, first thing we want to make note is all of these rhombuses, rectangles, and squares have how many sides? 4, which makes it a what kind of polygon? Starts with the Q. Now, more specifically, maybe, these are all what type of special quadrilaterals? One that we just talked about yesterday. Parallelogram. Okay, these are all are parallelograms. Which means what? All the properties of the parallelogram, all these properties are going to still be true for a rhombus, for a rectangle, and for a square. Okay, so we don't have to list all those properties again. We're only going to list the properties special to a rhombus, special to a rectangle, and special to a square. Okay, so a rhombus, what is a rhombus? It is a parallelogram with what? 4 congruent sides. It is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides. So all 4 sides are the same. Is a square a rhombus? Does a square have all 4 equal sides? Yes. So all squares are rhombuses. Are all rhombuses squares? No. Okay. Let's go ahead and write down the properties. One is that the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. Diagonals are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so let's get a picture of that down. Okay, so remember a rhombus has 4 congruent sides. So this was not accidental. I always do it accidentally and then I put the 2 here. But they're all intended to be congruent to each other. Why are you taking notes with us? Okay, diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So when I connect this diagonal and this diagonal, I make what kind of special angles in here? Right angles, perpendicular lines, right angles. I'm not going to mark all of them, but all 4 of these are 90 degrees. So anytime you have a rhombus and they're asking you for one of these center angles here made by your diagonals, they are 90 degrees. Got it? Okay. Next one. Diagonals bisect the angles. Now you're going to have questions tonight on homework where you're trying to solve for x and you need to know these properties in order to do so. So you want to make sure you go back and you look at your notes. So remember, all sides are congruent. I'm going to draw my diagonals. It says it bisects the angles. What do we know about opposite angles of any parallelogram? Opposite angles are what? Congruent. We learned that yesterday, yes? Any parallelogram, doesn't have to be a rhombus. Opposite angles are congruent. So with that being said, if I have 2 congruent angles here and I bisect them, that means I cut them both in equal pieces. How many little congruent angles will I have here? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why? Because these 2 were congruent to begin with, both of these here, the big ones, and then I cut them right down the middle, each one of them in half. So these 2 are congruent to each other, these 2 are congruent to each other, and they are all congruent across ways. So all four are congruent. Same thing here. This bigger angle is congruent to this bigger one, and when I bisect, I have four little congruent angles. Should you know that for a rhombus? Yes, you will need that in order to solve for X on some of tonight's problems. Okay, now I'm not going to write it down, but what is also true about a diagonal, diagonals of a rhombus? They do what to each other? Bisect each other. Do I have to write it down? No, because it is a parallelogram, all of these properties are still true. We're not going to write them down over and over. So, on homework, when they ask you, what are 3 things you know about the diagonals of a rhombus, and you look at your notes and you're like, oh no, Mrs. Torres only gave me 2, where's the third? Yesterday's notes. It's here. Diagonals of a parallelogram will be true for diagonals of a rhombus. Got it? Okay. Next one. Rectangle. What is a rectangle? Is it also a parallelogram? Yes? It's a parallelogram with 4, what do we know about their angles? Every single rectangle, all 4 angles measure what? 90 degrees. So 4 right angles. What's 90 times 4? And does that make sense? A quadrilateral adds up to 360. Okay, a quadrilateral with 4 right angles. Okay, so what is true with a rectangle? Diagonals are congruent. Diagonals are congruent. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's draw our rectangle. So just like all parallelograms, opposite sides are congruent. Not all congruent to each other, but opposite sides. And because it's a rectangle, all 4 angles are what? 90 degree angles. So if this is 90, this one's 90, they're all 90. Really quick, I'm going to cover this side. Are these opposite angles or consecutive angles? And what's 90 plus 90? And is that true? Consecutive angles are supplementary? These two that I'm pointing at, opposite or consecutive? Opposite. And what do we know about opposite angles? They are congruent? And are these two congruent? Okay. So, what does it mean for diagonals to be congruent to each other? First off, what do we know diagonals do to each other in any parallelogram? They bisect. Now, in my picture here, is this diagonal congruent to this diagonal? No, that's why I have 1 tick mark here and double tick marks here. With a rectangle, this diagonal is congruent to this diagonal. So when I bisect 2 congruent segments, all these little segments are congruent to each other. And I am going to put 3 tick marks here only because I already have tick marks on the outside. Okay. Make sense? So, what you need to recognize when you're doing these rectangle type problems is looking inside. I'm going to erase these markings. You can leave them on your paper. I'm only erasing them so it looks a little nicer on the eyes visually when I talk about these triangles. How many smaller triangles do I have inside? Right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you see them here? What kind of special triangles are they? These 2 legs are congruent. These 2 legs, I hear some of you saying it. What is it? Isosceles. So when you see these problems, always remember there are 4 isosceles triangles. All right. Which means what? If they're isosceles triangles, these two base angles are congruent. These two base angles are congruent. These two base angles are congruent. And those two base angles are congruent. Does that make sense? Is this angle right in here that I'm pointing to, is that 90 degrees? No, because that's only true for a rhombus, and a rectangle is not a rhombus. It could be, but not all rectangles are rhombuses. Questions? Okay. Next one is the what? Square. Before I get to the square, on homework tonight, when they say list two things that are true about the diagonals of a rectangle, and you look at your notes and oh no, Mrs. Torres only gave me one, where's the other one? In yesterday's notes, because the diagonals here is true for the diagonals on both of these. All right, number 3, square. And a square has 4 congruent sides. Is it a parallelogram? Yes or no? So it's a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. Can you think of it as a rhombus and a rectangle put together? A rectangle has 4 right angles. A rhombus has 4 congruent sides. Put the two together and you have a square. Yes or no? Okay, so that means that a square has diagonals that are perpendicular to each other, just like it did for the rhombus. It has diagonals. This here is the perpendicular symbol. Diagonals, and I'm going to erase the word R and put bisect. Diagonals bisect the angles, and again that is the same thing that we had here up here for the rhombus, and the diagonals are congruent. Bless you. So it's the two properties from the rhombus, the one property from the rectangle put together. Any questions? Okay, in this little bubble space, we're going to do just one quick example before we start the homework together. If I gave you that the following is a square, let's draw our square. And I'm going to label this square A, B, C, and D. And I'm going to draw a diagonal, both of my diagonals. Draw it down, write it down, get it down on your paper. And then I'm going to number some angles. I'm going to number this 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. Angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3. All right, so we're going to find each one. First off, is a square a rhombus? A rhombus has all equal sides. Is a square a rhombus? Yes. Now remember what I said. The first thing you should think about with the rhombus is look if they're asking you for these angles in here, because those are freebies. Any angles inside the rhombus right here at the center where the diagonals intersect are always going to be what kind of angles? Right angles. Are they asking me for any inside? Which number? Which number?
3.
3. So 3 without any work is what? 90 degrees, because it is a rhombus. All right. Is a square also a rectangle? Yes? Okay. Now, what did I tell you about rectangles? You have what type of little triangles in there? So if this is an isosceles triangle, I want you to think about how you're going to solve. If it's an isosceles triangle, what do we know about angles 1 and 2 if it's an isosceles triangle? they're equal. They're called the what angle? Starts with the B.
Base angle.
Base. You are correct. Now, I need to know that angle in order to solve for those two. Any thoughts? Yes. Vertical angles are congruent. So if that's 90, this is also 90, which I heard you say 90 degrees. Are all these corners in here 90 degrees?
Yes.
Yes, because it is a rhombus, because a square is a rhombus. All right, so make your equation. I'm going to call both of these x just so I can have a variable in there. 90 plus x equals what? What do the inside angles of a triangle add up to? 180. Go ahead and solve that now. 90 plus 2x equals 180. 90 plus 2x equals 180. Subtract, divide. What's 180 take away 90?
90.
It's another 90, and then we divide both sides by 2, and what does that give me? X equals 45. So 1 is 45 and 2 is also 45. Is that going to be true for all squares?
No.
For all squares? Are all these inside angles going to be 90 degrees for all squares?
Yes.
And are all these two going to be always congruent?
Yes.
So would they always come out to be 45? Yes. For squares, yes. All right, questions? All right, put this aside and take out your packets and open up to worksheet 3. All right, let's take a look at number 6. Find the measure of the numbered angles in each rhombus. Okay, taking a look at number 6. What do we know about opposite angles of a rhombus? They are congruent and the diagonals do what to them? Bisect. So I have a little congruent set here of 4 and a congruent set here of 4. Do you agree? So look at number 6. That's where we're starting off. 54 is going to match up with what angle? 3. And what other angle? 2. Because I said all of these little ones in there are congruent. So angle 2 and 3 are what? 54. 2 is 54. 3 is 54. Any thoughts on 1 and 4? They are the same. Who said that? Somebody did. Do you guys agree they are the same? I'm going to turn the triangle this way. Do we also have an isosceles triangle here as well? Not the same as we do in a rectangle, not the 4 little ones inside, but do we still have an isosceles triangle here, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. What is angle 2? We just found it to be what? 54. What is this angle in here? We didn't have to find it, but we should know it's what? 54. Do you have enough to find angle 1? Yes. 54 plus 54 plus angle 1 adds up to what? Write that down on your paper. 54 plus 54 plus angle 1 adds up to, what did you guys say? 1, not 108. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. 54 plus 54 plus angle 1 adds up to 180. But 54 plus 54 is 108. Is that what you guys are telling me? So 108 plus angle 1 equals 180. Subtract, what does angle 1 come out to be? 72. So not only is angle 1 72, what else is 72? Angle 4. Let's take a look at number 7. What is the easiest angle to find on number 7? I heard somebody say 4. 4 is the freebie. In this particular picture, 4 is the freebie. What is 4? The other ones are easy as well, but what is 4? 90. Without any work, without looking for any other angles, do you guys all agree that 4 is 90? Why? Because it is a what? It is a 90-degree angle. It is a right angle, but what's the name of the shape? A rhombus. When it is a rhombus, look for the inner angles. What is the freebie on number 9? What two angles? 2 and 3, without any work. I don't have number 8 in my screen. Now I do. What's the freebie on number 8? 2. Okay, so going back to number 7, you guys said 2 and 3. What 2 and 3 are both what? 68. Do you guys see that? If these two are 68, then those two are 68. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so see if you can figure out angle 1. What's this little angle right here?
90.
90. What is angle 2? You guys just told me it is 68. Do you have enough to find angle 1? Yes, can you see the triangle? This triangle right here. And I'm going to call on Ethan. Ethan, can you tell me an equation, even if you don't set up an equation, what would the equation look like to find angle 1 if that's 68 and that's 90?
68 plus 90 plus angle 1 equals 180.
Beautiful. 68 plus 90 plus angle 1 equals 180. Does that make sense? Is that a yes? All right, I'm going to flip over to the back side just really quick to talk about a few on the back side. Number 17, a rhombus. That one's a little trickier. Anybody know how to find x on number 17?
No.
What was that? To equal to each other? Well, they're not opposite each other, so they can't equal each other. I'll give you a hint right here. Yes.
Since that one's across from the 2x minus 1, isn't it the same?
Good job.
You can add all of them up to 180.
Good job. Did you guys hear her? She said, aren't these two the same, the 2x minus 1s, because they're opposite and the diagonals bisect on a rhombus, so they all add up to 180. Okay, what about 19? What's the shape here? And what do we know? What do the diagonals do to each other? They bisect each other, but I said it wrong. Diagonals are what? Look at your notes. They are equal. So I have all those little congruent markings. How am I going to solve for x? Good job. Did everybody hear? 9x minus 9 equals 7x plus 1. How about number 21? Number 21. Do those two angles add up to 90? No, because it's not a rectangle. Who has it? What do diagonals do to your angles on a rhombus? Bisect. So what can we say about those two angles? They are equal to each other. Questions? All right, what's your homework tonight? Getting the worksheet done.